Hi guys, Ali Duzette here. It is 2:19 a.m. and I couldn't sleep, and it's been a long time since we hung out in the middle of the night. So I'm excited to hang out with you over the internet this very morning. Okay, I've been meaning to make this video for a long time, but I've had pneumonia for the past couple of months. But we have to talk about where we are on the timeline, right? On this like enormous timeline of the Pluto return, the end of the world, all of this kind of thing. We have to talk about it. Okay, before we even can talk about it, I kind of wanted to give you guys a window into my own mind about this. Um, so that you can see where I'm coming from with my interpretation of the star charts that we're going to look at and all of the other things that are going on right now. And so I will start by saying that I was born in 1988. And uh so this is like a little timeline of my apocalyptic nature, okay? So I was 11 years old when everybody was talking about Y2K. That was when all the computers were switching from 1999 to 2000, and nobody knew if the computers could handle it. And so people were terrified that, they'd be stuck on an elevator, um, I guess at midnight on New Year's Eve and be stuck in the elevator for life, and like die in there or something, because the computers would all switch over to the year 2000 and all the computers would stop working. People were really terrified of this. At least that was my perception of it at the age of 11, was that people were really scared. And I felt scared. And I remember this talk about food storage and um, really worrying if like Jesus was going to come back for the year 2000, like 2000 years after Jesus's birth, all of this kind of thing. And I don't know. I mean, I was 11 and now I'm sitting there like, what? How did this get on my radar anyway? My parents did watch the news with us in the room. My dad did work in IT. And so I think we talked about it and stuff. But I was scared and a lot of people were scared. And then everything was fine. And Y2K ended up being not a thing. After all this big hype, it was like not a thing. Then what comes next is, of course, 2001, right? We had 9/11, and I was actually in New York City on September 8th, I think the Saturday before my family had gone up to go visit my aunt and uncle who lived in New York City. And I remember that we were going to go check out the World Trade Center, but we decided that no, we'd rather go see the UN building. So we all went to the UN building, and my uncle was just like, we'll see the World Trade Center next time. It'll always be there. He literally said that. And then like 3 days later, it was, absolutely leveled. And of course, I'm from Maryland. So we were about an hour outside of Washington, D.C., where I grew up. And so we're in like the greater Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. And so 9/11 happened. My local middle school was being renovated at the time. And so we were all bused to, yes, I was in middle school for that. Oh my goodness. But we were being bused down county, to another middle school that I believe was closer to Washington, D.C. than our original school. And so 9/11 was just absolutely terrifying. And I think everyone in America was very terrified, but actually being right there next to it. And like my city where I grew up is Gaithersburg, Maryland, which is the most diverse city in America. And so we had a lot of like ambassadors' kids and just like people, like everybody's parents worked in the city, and so everybody was terrified. We all just sat in the lunchroom and waited for parents to pick us up. My parents didn't pick me up. Those jerks. So me and my little brother were just like terrified out of our minds, waiting for the bus to come take us home like it was a normal day. Um, but it was not a normal day. And my mom managed the HOA of our town. And I mean, like she told me about how she would put these tickets on this car the next like for months to come afterwards, and nobody would move this car. And anyways, the owner died in the Pentagon, in our neighborhood. And so that was very terrifying. Oh, okay, what comes next? That would be anthrax. Okay, I don't know if you remember that. Everybody's absolutely terrified of their mail and all white powder. I mean, we were absolutely terrified of our mail. It's true. And man, you literally thought you're taking your life in your hands, opening a letter from your grandma. I mean, I don't know, it was crazy times. And then right after that comes what? The sniper, the Washington, D.C. sniper, which was also in my neighborhood. And so I was in an honors choir at the time, and we would have to drive through the county to get there. And every way, like the only way to get there is to pass the gas station, like the famous sniper gas station, And it was our school that said, you know, if you're going to walk home, you need to like run home in a zigzag pattern so that the sniper has a harder time shooting you. Can you believe this? I mean, like, we laughed about it at the time. We would make jokes about it as we ran home in zigzags, but we did that. Like, we truly did. And we were terrified, and like we laughed about it, and we were absolutely terrified out of our minds. And guess what? We mostly survived. I mean, like, the sniper did kill several people or whatever, but like, you know, none of my friends, we all survived. Oh man. And then what's up next? We had 2012, of course, the end of the world, the Mayan calendar. And of course, in the yogic tradition, 2012 was the beginning of the Aquarian age. And I was aware of all of this because I've always like been apocalyptically minded, right? And so I was like, oh my gosh, it's the end of the world. Oh no. I was freaking out. I don't know, my husband thought I was like totally crazy, but I was like, we have to get our food storage in order. We have to have this. And that year, it might have been a year or two after 2012. It's probably 2014 that there was a weekend where I and my mom and my grandmother all separately had like incredibly specific like visions, dreams, like hearing the voice that says like get your food storage in order and this kind of thing. And it all happened the same weekend, and we all were like happening to go to this event together. And at this event, we all went out to lunch, and one of us just said, like, you'll never believe the prompting I got over the weekend. And we all had the same prompting. And so we were like, oh my gosh, the end is nigh. We better prepare. That was like 10 years ago. It's been a long time. Like, all the food storage that I bought then, I can't imagine it's like extra in great condition right now. Like, I made sure to get stuff that was shelf stable, but this is like a third of its shelf life. Like, if it's going to last for 30 years, we've had it for a while. Ugh. But so that was 2012. And then, you know, we had some little like quiet times, but not really, because of course at that same time we had Ebola was a big thing. I think it was 2013 or something like that, if my memory is correct. Terrified of Ebola. And then of course we had 2020, right? And so 2020, so of course this all started with this big conjunction that happened in January of 2020, which I've talked about on this channel a bunch. We kept our eyes on that. All the astrologically minded people have been watching that for years in advance, wondering like, what is that Saturn, Pluto, Ceres, Mercury, Jupiter conjunction, like Sun conjunction, going to yield for us? Everybody kind of guessed that we were looking at more totalitarianism, government control over communication and the economy and harvesting, I mean, like, of food. And so like nobody at the time, no astrologers at the time that I can recall, were talking about supply chain issues, but like that's what, like, in those terms, but that's what we were talking about. But we didn't realize that's what we were talking about. We were just like, oh, the government will just control, like how food is made and like taken place. But like, that is the supply chain. Like, what we were seeing was like everything that's happened since 2020, but we just didn't. I mean, like, you look at these charts and you see them and you don't really know what they mean, like, you do and you don't. You do and you don't. And I want to come back to that. No, maybe I'll just start there, which is to say that I just had my birthday last week, and every year on your birthday you get a whole new star chart for that talks about your year. And so 2 birthdays ago, I got my star chart and I was so excited about it. Had my sun and my moon in the first house, so this is like a big year for healing the physical body. And the last time I had good stuff going on in the first house, I like got really fit. I was like really in shape. And I was like, yes, I have like the stars have aligned for me to become super fit. Um, I had Leo rising, which is all about like your shiny moment in the spotlight. And I was like, yes, I'm going to like shine. My brilliance will be on display. I'm going to get so fit and healthy. I had Pluto in the sixth house. I was like, I'm going to transform my health and like take care of myself. And what did I have? Was none of that. I got to have months of pneumonia and like be sick and just like be told to rest and do nothing. And like everything that I thought I was seeing in my chart, my chart was accurate, but it had a different accuracy than I expected or wanted. I hope that makes sense. So I'm excited for a new year, although this new chart, I will see how this year plays out for me too. Um, but all of that is just to be an example of how a chart, you can look at a chart and you see what it says, but you don't know exactly like the details of how it will come to pass. Like my chart with the sun and the moon in the first house and Pluto in the sixth house, I knew there's absolutely going to be a transformation of my health. And that is what I got. But I thought it was going to be a transformation that was going to really support me, getting back into weightlifting and like doing all of the stuff that I used to like as far as physical fitness. And instead, what it looked like was being basically bedbound for months. Still a transformation of health. Like the chart was still accurate, but my interpretation was not accurate. Okay. So that brings us back to 2020. And I think about this so much about how in March of 2020, like if you had said to us all in April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November of 2020 that the world was going to be basically back to normal by 2022, like would you have believed it? Would you have believed it? Would you have believed that like here we are, it's August in 2023 and like you can go to the grocery store without a mask on, like would you have believed it? And we had all of that talk about all these mandates and like I don't know. I mean, like we just there were so many fears and but here we are, like, and things became normal again. And so as I analyzed over like 2022, so during 2022, we had America's 3 Pluto returns. Okay. Pluto has a 244-year cycle around the sun. And so most things never see their Pluto return, which is when Pluto goes back to the same spot that it was in the sky when something was born. And so, yeah, humans don't live that long, so we don't get to experience our own Pluto returns, but countries can. And so I've done some videos on different countries' Pluto returns in the past. And what I found was this pattern of after a Pluto return, there's like a 12-year period of decline and revolution. And that is not always in the form of like war and civil war, but it usually is. But sometimes it's in the form of like massive technological revolution. Although I wonder in the cases of that, I wonder how much of that was because of the nature of where Pluto was in the original chart, if that makes any sense. So, but anyway, for America, I've been sitting here thinking, I think we're due for like a serious revolution, but not necessarily today, but over the course of the next 12 years, which is a long time. And so this is like the short version of what we're going to keep talking about for a minute, which is that I do think that the days of the world as we know it are numbered. But I think we have more time than we think, which is a thought that I never thought I would think in my whole life of going through, Y2K and 9/11 and the sniper and anthrax, Ebola, the 2012, 2020. Like, these are not thoughts that I thought I would think. And I know that, we're supposed to live our lives in case Jesus comes back today, like, be ready for it. And people have lived their lives like that since Jesus came the first time. So it's been 2,000 years. And I want to say that I think that there's a healthy way to do that and a really unhealthy way to do that. And I think that I have personally lived in an unhealthy way to do that for a lot of years of my life. And I feel like I'm out of that zone for now. And maybe I'll come back to it. I'll leave the door open for that. But the thing is that Jesus didn't come back in 900 AD, and as I look back at the history of humanity and the history of humanity in the context of Christianity and like end time prophecy and this kind of thing, there have been so many times in history that people have assumed that things were so bad, like, of course, Jesus has to come back soon. I mean, like, think about the Black Death, right? The plague in the 1300s. It wipes out half, like an actual half of all the humans that are alive in all of Europe. I mean, like, this is a phenomenal number. I mean, like, look at your family and half of you is dead from the plague, and also half of everyone else's family is dead from the plague. That was the reality. I mean, like, can you imagine going through that? And I mean, it's the end of the world, right? Or I think about things like the Holocaust, or just come on my brain, but like the Gulag Archipelago, and I don't know if you've read that book, but I mean, it's just absolutely shocking and horrifying. And I read that book and I just thought, man, like, if you were stuck in the Gulag, you would be sitting there saying, like, Jesus has to come back any second now. Like, this is as bad as it gets, and people, I mean, like, we have experienced as a species, we have experienced as bad as it gets for a long time. And I don't know, one thing that I've kept thinking about, I haven't even read this book, but there's a book called When Christ and His Saints Slept. My mom had told me about it, but I haven't read it. But she would always say how, throughout history, there have been times where people have been in such despair that they thought Christ must be sleeping. Why am I crying about this? I'm really going to cry about it. But there have been so many times throughout history that it has seemed completely hopeless, but humanity has continued, and we have kept going. So as I've been looking at the Pluto return and looking at our current situation, I've been trying to sit here and think, like, where are we on this timeline? And of course, like, the pattern has been this 12-year process. And so if the Pluto return was in 2022, that puts this transformational process completing around 2034, which is a really interesting number because that puts us exactly 2,000 years after the crucifixion of Christ, which is interesting, right? And so then that brings up all sorts of, all these different prophecies and like timelines from these different prophecies. And it gets kind of messy, and I still am kind of working through it, because for me, as a 12-year-old, when Gordon B. Hinckley dedicated the temple in Palmyra, New York, I thought at that time, and I feel like I wrote this down in my journal, but I haven't actually found my journal to verify this, but I thought he said that this was like opening the seventh seal. And we know from the scriptures that after the seventh seal opens, there's a half hour of silence. And if a day to God is 1,000 years on the earth, that puts a half hour of silence at 20 years, which would put the half hour of silence ending in April of 2020, which is really interesting timing, given everything that happened in April of 2020 and beyond. But then what happens after the half hour of silence closes? Then what happens next? And what kind of a timeline are we looking at after that? And that's the thing that I've been kind of fuzzy on, because we know, the prophecies of Daniel and like time and times and half a time. We have like the 3.5 years. We have like the 7 years. We have all of these different timelines that we want to make sense of. And I don't know. I feel like I have not made total sense of them, and I'm like working on it, and I like think about it, but I haven't put it all together in a way that totally makes sense. But my big conclusion for now has just been that, yeah, time is limited, but I think we have a lot more time than we think, which is not to say that we need to just like sit back and relax and like not take our healing seriously, not take our life mission seriously or something, but it is just to say I don't think we need to be living in terror. I don't think we need to be living in abject terror. I just don't think that. Because I think that there is more time. So I want to take a look at these different star charts real fast. So let me pull them up because this is not the one that I want to look at first. So I'll tell you a terrible thing, which is very awful, which is that my computer, I don't know what happened to it, but it deleted all of my saved charts on my star chart program. Oh my gosh. So a little quick recap for people that are not familiar with me, and I'll stop my share for a second. So I am a Christian and I study the stars. Yes, I call myself an astrologer, and people like lose their minds about this. But if you actually read the Bible, it talks about how the stars have been ordained to act as witnesses of the times and seasons. People say that the wise men who followed a star to Jesus were astronomers, which makes like no sense. And I get that we want to call them that so that we don't feel guilty that they were astrologers, but like, let's be real, those guys were not qualified to work at NASA, not qualified, okay? They were looking at the stars to read their symbolic meanings, which is astrology. That is what they were doing. They were looking at the stars to use them as signs and witnesses of the time. That is astrology. So in my own opinion, I feel like I am following a Christian and time-honored and godly divine path of using the stars to inform my understandings of prophecy and how the world works. And I get that some people are terrified of that and think it's evil and stuff like that. That's fine. If that is you, then hang up now, leave my channel and never return. Not really. Let's be friends. I hope you can be a little open-minded here and just take a look at what we're looking at. But we're going to look at what the stars are saying about all of the stuff that's going on. So, okay, back to America's birthday chart. Okay, I'll stop my own video so we can see this bigger on the screen. This is the moment that America, this is what astrologers use as America's birthday chart, which is 5:10 p.m., July 4th, 1776, Philadelphia. This is the signing of the Declaration of Independence, the first breath of America. Has the sun at 13 degrees of Cancer, Jupiter right there, and Venus. So like big, strong support for our economic support here in our natal chart. We've got a rising Sagittarius, inventive, exploratory, expansive, into expanding horizons and sciences and engineering and higher knowledge. And then, of course, we have an Aquarius moon, which is going to drive us as a nation to be very humanitarian oriented, to think outside the box. We're thinking in ways that have never been seen before, you know, and that is really true. Of course, America is unlike any other nation. And especially when it was created, it was this huge experiment. And people said, I don't know if a government like this can work, but we tried it. And I just love that, like, what an Aquarius moon in the third house kind of attitude to have, you know. And so okay, but here we have Pluto, and here we have the south node, which matches this guy. These two horseshoes are connected. Okay, and so let's talk about that first. This is America's nodal path, which goes away from Aquarius and to Leo, from the second house to the 8th house. And this is a really interesting setup because this deals with, but this is an axis of money. Okay, the 2nd and 8th house, this is an axis of money. This deals with your resources, and this deals with your inheritance, other people's resources. Okay, so like the money that you earn goes down here, the money that your ancestors earned, money that you know, your spouse earned, like that goes up here. And your south node and your north node, okay, this is your lucky horseshoe, this is your basket. This basket carries like the traumas of your past and the gifts from your past and your ancestors and stuff like that. And up here is like your destiny. So everybody in their whole life, you have a north node, and your entire life mission centers around how are you going to express your north node. How are you going to move away from whatever's going on with your south node and towards whatever's going on in your north node? As a nation, we are called to move away from Aquarius in the second house and towards Leo in the eighth house. That is our divine mission according to, the star chart. So I don't know, take it with a grain of salt, but this is what the stars say. Stars say, get away from Aquarius in the second house, go to Leo in the eighth house. What does this mean? It means we need to get away from humanitarian uses of our money and towards putting ourselves first when it comes to our finances. That is the message of this placement. Okay. And this is that X marks the spot is going to be our treasure. This is the part of fortune. Like our treasure will come as we live our destiny of America first, basically. And so I know that there's lots of people on my channel, not everybody's American, but I think the thing about America is that as America goes, so goes the world. Like America really does set the tone for how the rest of the world plays out and handles itself. And I'm not here to say that that's fair or something like that, but I am here to say that that is how it is. In a very real way, America finances so much of what's going on with the world, which is right here. This is like exactly what we're not supposed to do, is send our money everywhere else. We are that, but anyway, okay, so that's the nodal path. And this is something I have kept on coming back to as I'm thinking about the timeline. Okay, this is Pluto. He's rising from the dead. That's what he's doing. He's being resurrected, his little arms in the air. And he's at 27 degrees and 33 minutes of Capricorn. And so how the Pluto return works is like Pluto returned back to where it was in that moment. So when Pluto finally came back to 27 degrees and 33 minutes of Capricorn, it came back 3 times. Even though it's on a 244-year cycle or circuit, it came back in February 20th of 2022, which is right when Putin invaded Ukraine. Then we had July 11th of 2022, and I can't remember what happened at that exact time, but I made some videos about it, so you can go back and look at those. And then the final one was on December 28th of 2022, and what happened there is called a retrograde. So Pluto, no planet ever goes backwards. They all keep going the same direction. But from our perspective, from the Earth's perspective, it can look like things are temporarily moving backwards against the backdrop of the zodiac. So when we say that a planet's going retrograde, it's not actually going backwards. It just looks from our perspective like it's going backwards. But everything is all about us. It's all about you, baby. And so what it looks like to you from your perspective is like the most important thing. So that is why we count retrogrades. But what happened was Pluto went retrograde. So it was going forward, and it whacked the first Pluto return. Then it went backwards and whacked it again. And then it went forwards again and whacked it again. And again, it did not actually move backwards and forwards. But from our perspective, it did. From our perspective, it appeared to go forward, backward, forward on its track through Capricorn. Okay. So we had the final Pluto return in December of 2020, of 2022, but the entire year of 2022 was basically colored by this Plutonian movement. Pluto deals with death and rebirth. Okay, it prunes what is dead so that new growth can come up. And Pluto deals with transformation, and it deals with all the stuff that people don't want to deal with. Like if you are having a really tough time in your life, it's probably related to Pluto. Like if you hire an astrologer to go look at it for you, they'll be like, what is Pluto up to, in a personal chart, if somebody's dealing with depression, that's what you go look at. Go look at Pluto, see what Pluto's up to. So Pluto, I don't know, Pluto's a tough planet, but okay, let's pull up the third Pluto return. Because we had 3 Pluto returns, anytime you have 3 returns like that, what it indicates is on a personal level. So let's back up and say everybody has all sorts of planetary returns, and they all show up in your life, and they have shown up in your life, and you just didn't even know it because you weren't plugged in with this. But so as a good example, Saturn is on a 29-year cycle. So most people in the modern age live through at least one Saturn return. Most of them live through 2. Most people don't live through 3 Saturn returns, but your Saturn return is going to be like 29, It's going to happen again when you're like about 58. And when Saturn returns, it triggers all of your Saturn stuff in your life. And so Saturn deals with unresolved baggage and making sure that you are experiencing the justice of your life. And so Saturn returns are famous for having people's lives fall apart because it just triggers up all of your unhealed stuff, all of your unhealed baggage. So year 29, year 58, those are big transformational years on a personal level. When a human being has 3 Saturn returns in one single year, because Saturn went retrograde, what that means is it kind of opens up this window between the 3 returns, such that, I mean, like, the message is basically that the person gets these 3 experiences with these returns. It's helped them get really clear on their goals and like what's going on. When a person has a triple return like that because of a retrograde, it indicates that there's something unresolved, that there's like a question that needs to be answered before they can move on. And so one of my friends had a triple Saturn return recently. It was her second Saturn return, and then, like, of course, her third and her fourth Saturn return, because she had this little retrograde cycle and it took about 6 months. And during that time, like almost to the day, her Saturn returns lined up with all of these people recruiting her to come and work at their different offices. Okay, so they were like, get a job, come work for me, come work for me. So during her Saturn return, she spent the entire thing just like flying out to these different places to interview and see if it would be a good fit. And she had to really confront all these questions in her own heart of what she wanted to do with her work. And Saturn governs work. So this was like a perfect example of the Saturn return for her. And then in the end, after flying out, spending this whole period of the Saturn return window, she like had a lot more clarity on what to do moving forward with her job. So most people just have one Saturn return. Most people don't have that 3-part Saturn return retrograde window like that. And so how that would work instead is it's kind of like an alarm. Every time you have a return, like a Pluto return, Saturn return, your solar return, a lunar return, it's like an alarm. And what I mean by that is if you, okay, so okay, it's 2:51 a.m. right now. So my little kids are sleeping, their bedroom is over there. And my son has set his alarm for 6 a.m., even though he doesn't have to get up until 7:15, but he likes to get up early. And when his alarm goes off, it doesn't force him to get out of bed, but it does provide a trigger that usually leads to him actually getting out of bed. And that alarm does not force him to go to school, and yet its presence does influence the fact that he gets to school on time. Does this make sense? Astrological movement is like the same way. It's like these alarms. It's like God's alarm clock. And I do believe that. I believe that the stars are God's clock and that we are living inside of this enormous clock that God has set. And if you can understand the clock, then you can understand the nature of reality a lot better. And that is like why I do what I do in this arena, right? And so the stars don't force anybody to do anything, but they are acting as these alarms. And so, hearing your alarm clock go off does not force you to get out of bed. But when your body like feels that alarm, it knows like, okay, it's time for something new, or like if you think of an alarm on your phone to remind you to like take your kid to the orthodontist or something, like the alarm does not force you to do that, but it's showing you like, oh, you have to go to like there's an orthodontic appointment coming up, like you better get in your car. And you're like, oh, I guess I should get in my car, right? And so how these star influences work, they're just alarms. Like they're not forcing anybody to do anything, but I think our souls are influenced by them. And there's an interesting book about this that I think I have in this room, but I'm not seeing it on my bookshelves. But I can't see it, but I can't read it. I can't read the title of it, but oh my gosh, come on, my brain, what's it called? I'm sorry, I feel like I'm wasting your time not remembering the name of the book, but there's a book about economic cycles and and like star charts. It's like, but it's written by like an economist who just noticed that, of course, like recessions and economic growth do correlate with certain astrological phenomena. And so he just kind of like wrote a big book about it. And there's been numerous books about this topic because many economists have recognized this. And so it's really, I just love reading books by economists about astrology because they're like, we don't believe in astrology, but it is very helpful to make good investments. It's like, yes, it is. There's a famous, how famous is it if you've never heard of it? But it's in Forbes magazine that says, no, I'm not going to remember it, but it talks about how like the difference between a millionaire and a billionaire is millionaires think astrologers are stupid and billionaires hire astrologers like to help them like figure out their finances, something like that. But why am I talking about that? Oh, because in those books, one of the books that I was reading, he theorized that the issue is that our bodies, the water in our bodies, I mean, it is water, and like the moon exerts a gravitational pull over the earth, but all the planets exert gravitational pull. And so as the planets are moving, they're exerting different gravitational pull over your physical body, the water inside of your physical body, and how your water in your physical body is structured is linked to how all the planets aligned at the moment of your first breath, your birth, which is how we read your natal chart, your birth chart. And so anyway, that is to say that there are alleged scientific explanations for why these planetary movements would affect your physical body. If all the planets moving around are affecting the water movement inside of your body, it's going to affect how your brain is functioning. And so we are experiencing these alarms going off. We don't realize that's what's happening, but you may have had an experience like this where you were just kind of like living your life, and then like suddenly it just felt like something changed. It was like something turned off or something turned on in your body, and you were like, oh, now it's time for a new direction. And I don't know. I mean, I think this makes sense in the context of the gravitational pull, the planets, the natal chart, your own blueprint as created during the moment of your first breath, all of this kind of thing. Okay, why am I talking about this? Come on, Ellie. It's 3 a.m. and let's bring it back to the point. Okay, let's talk about America's third Pluto return. Okay, this is America's third Pluto return. And I cut off the word return, but that's fine. Okay, here. So this is like pretty interesting to have Pluto exact the ascendant. This is the ascendant. The moment of the horizon is at 27 degrees and 8 minutes, and here's 27 degrees and 33 minutes. I mean, like, what we're looking at is a period of death and rebirth, a massive restructuring. And it's going to, in particular, deal with the economy, which is Capricorn. This is double Capricorn, so massive focus on work. That's where the sun is. This is Venus, who deals with money. Mercury deals with communication, transportation, and how we think about the world and how we talk about it. They're right next to each other at 23 and 24 degrees, making a stellium with the ascendant and Pluto. Massive transformation in how we are making money, how we're spending money, how we think about jobs and work. And Capricorn is an earth sign, so also like land itself, the nature of resources themselves. And this is our, like, the next national identity is to have this massive transformation. But when you look at this chart, of course, what is the big thing that we want to look at is this giant glob right here, which is so big that you can see the software actually like made a little cutout here because there's so much stuff going on. It wouldn't fit in the normal size of this space right here. These are the house lines. These two lines mean like we're in the second house, which deals with money. And so what are we looking at with money in the context of this third Pluto return? We're looking at lots of different stuff going on that, I mean, like Vesta just deals with like everything. This is the energy of like making a casserole and mowing the lawn, like while the casserole is in the oven, and then like picking up your kids from school. Like this is busy, busy, busy. And here's the moon, a big focus on issues of money, land, resources. Neptune is going to be giving us a little bit of a delusional quality. Neptune deals with illusion and delusion. Are you psychic or are you insane? You know, and so this is going to be like a real question that a lot of us are going to have to deal with, especially over the next 12 years, as this alarm. So this third Pluto return acted as like an alarm, and everybody's body felt it. At least in America, and like the nation, I think, as an entity felt it. The alarm went off that like this is the next kind of energy that we're facing. And now we have 12 years for it to play out, and we're like 1 year into it. Last one was December of 2022, and so now it's what, August of 2023. So we're like 8 months in. Oh, exactly. It's the 28th, right? Is that true? It's the 29th. But we're like about exactly 8 months in out of like 12 years. So we have a ways to go before this whole thing, you know, falls apart or just restructures itself, however it's going to be restructured. But okay, so this is illusion and delusion sandwiched right between our national emotional state, and this is Juno, who deals specifically with currency, like paper money and like coins. Okay. So a lot of delusionality and about money issues, and this is all right next to Jupiter at 0 degrees of Aries. Jupiter is also a money centric planet, and to have it at 0 degrees of Aries, it tells me that we're going to start something new. 0 is like a new beginning. Aries deals with a new beginning. I mean, geez, 0 degrees of Aries is the astrological new year. And so we're having Jupiter here saying like, this is a whole new year. We're looking at something totally new, probably dealing with money. And it's probably going to involve some amount of emotional confusion, delusion, illusion, and I think it's going to be very unclear who is psychic and who is insane. You know, it's not going to be clear. We're going to look at people that are saying like everything is fine, don't worry about it. We're going to look at people that are like it is the end of the world. You know, buy your gold and silver now, you know, and we're going to look at that, and it's not going to be always super clear who is right. The timeline is not going to be clear. Like this whole little section is just saying like massive restructuring around money, and it's going to be confusing. Like this just tells me like brace yourself for not being able to have always clear answers. You're going to have to really go by your gut. You're going to have to really strengthen your connection with our creator so that every moment you can be led to the right decisions to be made with your money and your resources and your land. This house is about money, resources, land. It's also it's the house of foundations, all the foundations, like the foundation of your home, but also your emotional foundation and like the foundation of your values. So that is also really interesting in a national context, because if you think about things like, you know, the Constitution or like the Declaration of Independence, we count all of this from the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And so if we consider that like a foundational document of values, like what are the values of the Declaration of Independence? I don't know, we're looking at you know, a big transformation of how we are thinking about those and how we are taking action about those. Aries is a big action taker. So here we have the part of fortune, which is X marks the spot. It's the treasure right next to this about money and this about money. So just lots of stuff going on about money. But this is Chiron, which is our deepest soul wound. So all of this is to say, over the next 12 years, we're looking at a big revolution around how we earn money and spend money, think about money and transport money, and talk about money and the economy and jobs. And it all is going to come back to something brand new, a new beginning, dealing with money that makes us truly face our deepest soul wounds around all of this stuff. As I'm talking about it, this is the first time that I've really like thought about it. But all of this deals, so Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac, and then Aries 0 degrees of Aries starts the astrological new year. And I just think it's so interesting that here we have a house that is just about evenly split between Pisces and Aries. And we have all this stuff going on at the end of Pisces and all this stuff going on at the beginning of Aries. And it's like, what a perfect example of this same energy of like the ascendant energy and like, wow, I'm like not putting this in a coherent format, but I'm like, how do I say this in a way that makes sense? Basically, this just tells me again that we're seeing an ending and then a new beginning when it comes to specifically our values as a nation, our sense of our foundational documents, and like what is our nation built on, and then money and resources, finances, land use, and the economy and jobs, all of this kind of thing. Like we are going to have to do a massive resorting over this over the next 12 years. We'll also hop right over here because the North Node for this transit is in Taurus. So we're being called to focus on money and land. Taurus is the guy that's in charge of this house. Okay, Taurus is the landlord of this zone. And that is our North Node. Okay, and then like this is the sun. This is all coming back to these earth signs. All of this stuff that these are not earth signs, but they're in an earth house. We just have a massive focus on money, land, resources. But right here is Uranus, which deals with unexpected events and also like cataclysmic disaster. And so, so what we can expect over the next 12 years is big surprises that no one could see coming that are going to affect the destiny, like our destiny as a nation, and therefore the entire future of the planet, because whatever happens with America is going to be impacting all of these other nations that we are leading and supporting and stuff like that. And it's all going to come back to this restructuring of money. And okay, and so then we need to pause for a minute and go to the current transits. Okay, this is today. This is right this second, 3:06 a.m. Springfield, Utah. That's where I am. Okay, this is the only important thing I want to talk about this chart is that Pluto is currently at 28 degrees of Capricorn. And I have talked about this before on my channel when I was feeling better earlier in the year, about Pluto entering Aquarius. And so Pluto entered Aquarius, and Pluto again moves very slowly. Pluto can be in the same sign for decades, and it often is, as it goes on its 244-year cycle around the sun. But Pluto earlier in this year entered Aquarius. And this was probably in like March or April. I like can't remember, but it entered Aquarius for just a minute. And then it went retrograde in July, and now it's back in Capricorn, and then it's going to go back into Aquarius in January. Okay, I know that's gobbledygook. For people not familiar with these terms, I'm going to tell you what I just said in English. Okay, what this is indicating is for those couple of months earlier in this year, we had a lot of big talks about like the digital dollar. Aquarius deals with technology. Okay, it deals with technology, aliens, and of course we've had all these aliens hearings. Okay, as Pluto entered Aquarius, that was like front and center of the news cycle. Aliens, UFOs, alien hearings, and then we're talking about like the digital dollar. We're talking about cryptocurrency, AI. Okay, AI is a big one that is linked, like that was also in that big news cycle from like that exact period that Pluto had entered Aquarius. Everyone's talking about AI. Then Pluto retrograded back into Capricorn, and it's going to be in Capricorn until the end of December, basically. I think it goes back into Aquarius like January. I can't remember, like January the 2nd or something like that. And then it's in Aquarius for 20 years. While Pluto is in Aquarius for the next 20 years, starting in 2024, we're going to expect a lot of talk about technology. And I've talked about this again before on this channel, where I personally think what we're going to see is a massive stratification in who has available technology. Like, I think we're going to see massive increases in things like AI and crypto, digital dollar, digital currency, the ability for totalitarian systems to leverage technology to control and destroy the lives of their citizens. I think we're going to see a lot of that. At the same time, I think we're going to see a massive deconstruction of who has technology available to them. So it would not surprise me if we had this big, stratification, this big divide where some people have access to all the technology and some people have access to no technology. And that would make a lot of sense for this transit. I'm not going to say like Pluto's going to enter Aquarius in January and everyone's going to lose access to the internet except for our evil overlords that will use it to kill us. I don't think that. And so I'm not saying that. But I am saying that over the next 20 years, it would not surprise me if things naturally became, stratified in that direction. Okay. Maybe not exactly the way I described it, but it wouldn't surprise me if if things happened along those lines. The idea of like the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, like the people with a lot of technology get even more, the people without get even less. That is what I would kind of expect to see based on what's going on here. But okay, the last time that Pluto entered Capricorn was in 2008, and we had obviously the housing crash of 2008 as Pluto was like pruning the economy and the housing market, which are both ruled by Capricorn. And so now Pluto entered Aquarius, went back into Capricorn, and Pluto's back in Capricorn right now. And we had some bank closures. We had some like economically scary stuff going on at that time. And I think the more you know about what's going on in the economy, I think the more you're like, things are still not great, but they have not seemed to me to be on the top of the news cycle like they were more so right when Pluto was making this transit earlier in the year. So anyway, it would not surprise me if we saw another housing market crash type of situation. Not to say that's exactly what's happening, but like it would not surprise me if we had a big economic shakeup in around January of 2024. As I'm saying this, I'm like, you can't plan your whole like real estate life around this stuff. Okay, I just want to say that. I think that the most important thing is living in alignment with our creator so that you can receive the divine inspiration that you need in the moment that you need it. And God can tell you what to do with your housing situation and with your real estate questions. And, I make videos about this and then I get all these emails of people being like, should I sell my house? Or like all this stuff. I'm like, I don't know. I'm not you. Like, why don't you go pray about that? You go pray about that. You are qualified to get divine inspiration about all of the different things. So I recommend that you do that. But I think on a macro scale, it would surprise me if Pluto didn't exit Capricorn and go back into Aquarius. And like I would expect to see some big stuff with AI, big stuff with digital dollar, big stuff with economic restructuring. And that's really what we're looking at in the terms of the Pluto return in general as well. So this is two different things that Pluto is up to. The Pluto return of the United States of America, and then Pluto separately has now moved on, and now Pluto's doing its whole Aquarius entrance shenanigan. And these are two different things, but they are related. And they both are saying we're looking at some big transformations. Okay, but let's go back to this idea of how much time do we have? How much time do we have? Because that's like the question that I've asked myself since I was a child, worried about Y2K and like the second coming of Jesus Christ and all of these kinds of things. Like, how much time do we have? How much time do we have? And so I'm going to go back to what I was saying earlier. I think that we are on a final timeline to some extent. A great book that's coming into my mind is The End of the World is Just the Beginning by some guy whose name I cannot remember, but it might start with a Z, Zweigel or something. Can't remember. But that is true. The end of the world is just the beginning. Like whatever transformations that we're about to see is just the beginning. So let's go back to America's natal chart. Let me pull it right up. Okay, this is the big thought that I've had over the past little while, which is I think about this nodal path that we have for so long and how, not to get all political on you or something, but when I look at what's going on in America today and like the problems that we're facing, like I just personally see it so clearly as this issue of this axis and this issue of our humanitarian endeavors that have stretched us thin and indebted us by I mean like tens of trillions of dollars to other nations, when we're called to not do that. Like we are called to keep our resources, to on a national level have America basically, like this is a calling to have like an America first kind of policy where like, no, you probably should not be sending a ton of money in foreign aid overseas. Like this is how to experience death and rebirth, is through giving lots of foreign aid on a macro scale. And then on a more micro scale, we're talking about citizens and kind of like the redistribution of wealth on a personal citizen level, where it's saying like this is what's going to trigger your death, and how you're going to have to be reborn is the redistribution of wealth on a personal level, taking money from Stephen to give it to Susie, because because of all of the reasons that we justify it, but this is really a call that people should be keeping what they earn, I mean, like kind of like on a biblical level, like Paul says, like, if you do not work, you shall not eat. And like, this is kind of like, to me, I'm just looking at this, like, this is a call that our compassion, here's the thing, America's birthday chart shows a massive amount of compassion. We have this Cancer sun conjunct Venus and Jupiter, and we have this Aquarius moon conjunct Pallas. This is a chart of a nation that deeply cares about the poor, the underprivileged. We deeply care about people who do not have enough, and we want to take care of them. And I believe that is a really good thing. And what this chart is saying is that the answer to that is going to be through our personal service, not through the forced totalitarian style removal of wealth from one person to give it to another person. It has to be voluntary. To me, that is the message of this chart. And so the thought that I've kept on having is, if this is the trajectory and that we've been called to walk on, and like right now we are so mired in debt, and like this whole inflation situation that we have going on comes back to this issue, because like the stimulus checks from like COVID and everything, like that was such a Aquarius South Node in the second house kind of situation that we've wrapped ourselves up in. And we sit there and I mean, we've dug ourselves this huge hole. Like this inflation that we're seeing cannot possibly slow down without a disaster. I mean, like when it does slow down, how do I put it? I mean, we could talk about like the 70s and the 80s and the massive inflation that happened then. And in that book, The End of the World is Just the Beginning, he has a great chapter on this, about how what really stopped that inflation, like people, there's lots of people that claim lots of different things about what stopped that, but he argues that what saved the day was the discovery of oil, and that we found a bunch of oil deposits. And so what happened was, all of a sudden, all that oil entering the economy provided the value to match how many dollars there were in the economy. Does that make sense? When you have inflation, what you actually have is a mismatch between the value that has been put into the world and how many dollars there have been put into the world to match it. When you have too many dollars and you did not put in enough value, then you have inflation. And then you have like the prices rise, and I don't know, we find ourselves in the situation we find ourselves now, economically speaking. And it really comes down to this question of like, is money real? Is value real? If money, I don't know, if you can just print money, then why do we even have taxes in the first place, right? Isn't that a good question? I don't know. But like, if you can just print more money, if you can just send people more money, just because, we have a lockdown, nobody can work, so we can just send you money. but like nobody worked. Like there was no production of value to match the influx of dollars. And so is money real? Is value real? And I think that that's the big question that we're going to have to face in the coming months and years as this Pluto return unfolds. Coming to terms with issues of the reality of value and who is contributing value, how are they contributing it, how does that affect other people? And now I feel like I could go on like this whole other tangent about that, but I don't really want to because it's 3:19 a.m. and I feel like I've been talking for probably a full hour and I should probably let everybody go to sleep, including myself. I should go back to bed. But the real thing that I keep thinking about with that is, do we think, like, coming from a Christian perspective, the question I've asked myself is, do I truly believe that Jesus would come back before America has to face its massive debt crisis? Like, do I really think Jesus would come back before America has to really look ourselves squarely in the eye and deal with what we have allowed to transpire? Yesterday I posted a thing on my personal Facebook page, a quote from some Greek guy talking about the price that good men pay for indifference to basically politics is that they get to be ruled by evil men. Like, if good men don't pay attention to what's going on, then they get to be ruled by evil men, and that is true. And I think that's where we're at. And like, do we really think Jesus is just going to come like sweep us all up off into the heavens for the next stage of this adventure before we have to face the reality of what each of us has allowed to transpire? And of course, like, it's not like I personally am responsible for what's going on a national level. It's not like you personally are responsible either, but it's just to say that we're all these like tiny cogs in this giant mechanical whatever of what's going on. And I don't know, my sense has been I think we have several years, and I think we have several years of seeing the consequences, of seeing the fruits of our labors, for good or for evil. And I think we're going to see that on a national scale. I think we're going to see that on a personal scale as well. So, and that brings me to another point, which is that so somebody commented on my post yesterday that talking about how like so many of us are just like trying to stay alive. Like, we're in survival mode. So like, how am I supposed to like get involved politically if I'm like in survival mode? And that is like such a fair point. And I think that is exactly the point of my next point, which is that we have this national macro scale and like the global scale of everyone having to face their consequences, and we have it on a personal scale as well, right? We're on a personal scale. Like, what are we really dealing with on a personal scale? Because we're all affected by what's going on the macro scale, right? Like, that's affecting us with the grocery store prices. Like, we're affected by that. We're affected by gas prices. We're affected by I don't know, by things like the lockdowns and stuff like that. But on a personal level, like, how are we really, what are we really dealing with on a personal level? We're dealing with things like ancestral patterns and like the stuff we've inherited from our ancestors on like a genetic level, like your health, on a level of your on your financial level, like what patterns have you learned from your ancestors about money? What patterns have you taken on from them? Okay, how about abuse? Like, how about neglect? So many people are carrying these patterns from their family lines. And of course, everybody watching my channel, I feel like everyone is working hard to break those patterns. All of the yucky stuff, they're like actively working on shutting it down and changing and doing a new thing. And we also have, of course, our own inner, like our own childhood trauma, I believe our pre-Earth life trauma, our just like the trauma that happened yesterday. Like, we're working through our own beliefs and our own emotional stuff, and we're dealing with our personal lives also. And in our personal lives, every day, the stuff that we experience in our personal life is a reflection of where we have been in our internal life. Okay. The external reflects the internal. So, and it's on a little bit of a time lapse, because if you go ahead and you like start seriously healing all of your issues from the inside out, your outside might not reflect that immediately. And sometimes it does. People on my site and people in my ecosystem, I guess you could say, like some of them have crazy stories where they like do some of these sessions, they like do this work, and like the next day a crazy miracle happens. Like that does happen, but it doesn't always happen. And sometimes you have to like do the work one step at a time to clear out the stuff in the way that's holding you back. I'm talking about things like self-sabotage, learning to heal your patterns of sabotaging yourself, sabotaging your own success, getting out of your own way. And sometimes it takes a long time to like do the work and get it done so that your external life changes. Your external life is reflecting a higher quality of internal life. So to go back to my friend's comment, it's true. So many of us are in survival mode. And how are we supposed to manage dealing with the stuff that's happening, on a macro scale when like the micro scale is a mess, And that is very fair. And I have so much to say about that as well, because I think that there's so much interesting stuff going on with the historical context of this and what has led us to this point where so many of us are in super, super survival mode in a way that is different from the way it has been in the past. Because of course, everyone has always lived in survival mode. I mean, again, we just talked about like the Black Death in this same video, plague times, but like historically that has been what life has been all about, is like survival. And now we're in a really interesting space where it is still about survival, but we have such a different quality of life. We have such different standards of living, which I think really contributes to how much stress everybody is under, so debt, buying a house on debt and having this like massive explosion of debt really started taking place in like the 1940s, 1950s. And before that, it was just not the same. And through most of history, people would like build their own houses, and then you could, theoretically own the house that you built with your own hands because it was your labor and your time. And now that's like not really a thing. And with all of our technological advancement, it adds so much value into the world, and it requires so much valuable expertise and work that the price of our lifestyles is just so high. Like this is why we are all in debt for our houses, and because our houses have plumbing and they might have 2 stories, and they probably have electricity, they might have the internet, like all of these things are extremely valuable. They have these price tags to match. And of course, not to say like there's not totally inflated prices. Like I look at my house and I'm like, this is not worth what I paid for it. This is crazy talk. And now my house I could sell it for twice what I paid for it. And I'm like, this is not worth that. Like it wasn't worth its original price. This is not a great house. So not to say that like the prices are not like out of control, because I think that a lot of cases they are, but it is just to say that the value, I mean, it is to live in a house like mine that has plumbing and a set of stairs and the internet and lights. Like these lights like can dim and raise, and like that's so cool. Like this is a different world than when you lived in a 1-room log cabin. But when you have a more valuable lifestyle, you have to contribute more value to earn it. And I think most human beings have been capable of contributing the value of a 1-room log cabin. And I don't know that most human beings, have it in them to contribute the value to match like the kind of lifestyles that we have created for ourselves. I hope that's not like offensive or something. I don't know, but I just think maybe most people are capable of doing that, but most people don't do it. Like most people realistically like don't do it, or they do, but it takes them the full 30 years, right? The full like 30-year mortgage. So we sell the next 30 years of our lives to like pay off the house that we buy today, right? Getting ourselves into this big debt. I don't know, for value, like we're like, yes, I'm certainly going to provide enough value to the planet that I can afford a house that has a toilet and a washing machine and a refrigerator, you know. Um, but I don't know. I mean, like that's kind of where we've been at as a nation, like on the macro scale. On the macro scale, we've created all this technology, we've added all of this, we've made all this valuable stuff available, and then everybody wants it, but are we creating the value commensurate to earn that on a reasonable timeline? And of course the answer is absolutely not. Like, we have leveraged the lives of our grandchildren. And I felt very angry about this when I was a child, because I was like looking at the national debt when I was 12 years old and being angry about it and being like, oh my gosh, look at what my grandparents have done to me. Like, they sold me into slavery for, you know, so that they could have these lifestyles, and like the pensions and the whatever, the foreign aid, and like all of this stuff, like all the stuff that our government pays for, like who's paying for it? Well, it's our children. And I said, oh my gosh, look at what I'm on the hook for. And then I have kids and I sit there and think, what are they on the hook for? Yeah. And what it comes down to is we all need to be adding in more value, which is something I've talked about in other videos as well. Sorry, I feel like I've gotten like very controversial. What am I doing? It's like 3:30 in the morning. I'm sorry. I hope we can still be friends after this video. But the point is, I think we're going to see a big reckoning on value. I mean, like, that is the message of, you know, America's birthday chart, is that second to eighth house thing is all dealing with issues of value and resources, and we have to face the reckoning with that. And then we look at the Pluto return chart. Come here, buddy. Okay, Pluto return chart. This is all a big reckoning to do with money, land, resources, and value. We have to face how much value have we put into the world on a personal level, and how much value have we taken out of it, and how much value on a macro scale are we adding to the world, and how much value have we taken out of it. And I don't know that it makes sense to expect, you know, Jesus is just going to show up and save us all before we actually have to deal with the cause and effect. And I want to say, I know that it doesn't feel fair. Okay. Because I mean, I look at, you know, my own life, like I said, like 12 years old. So when I started getting into obsessing over things like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, that's when I started like really digging into books about that kind of thing. And really looking into the national debt and reading the Constitution and like all that kind of stuff. And I was upset about it when I was a kid. Now I have kids. I mean, like, now my oldest son is 12. He's the same age that I was when I started getting into all of this. And I don't know. I mean, like, I didn't vote for, you know, for FDR or something like that. Like, I didn't vote for Herbert Hoover, you know? So like, it's not my fault that like this whole thing has escalated the way that it has, but like, how come I'm on the hook for it? You know, how come my kids are the ones on the hook for it when they didn't vote for it? And it comes back to this issue of generational patterns and inheritance, which is also really interesting because that second to eighth house axis is about inheritances, and our north node is in the house of inheritance. As a nation, it is. And to me, what that just says, it just really speaks to that biblical pattern of who your ancestors are matter. You know, in the Bible, God talks over and over again about how, like, when a generation makes a bad choice and it curses itself to the fourth generation, you know, that curses last on a family line for 4 generations. I think unless you consciously break it, and I think a lot of people watching this are like consciously breaking those kind of patterns, and you can do that. And I talk about that. I mean, like, AllieDoesThatClasses.com has, you know, ancestral healing. And I have a book about ancestral healing as well. It's on Amazon, but like, you can break these patterns. But the fact remains that there is a pattern. The pattern is that the children pay for the problems of their parents, you know, that, and that's just reality. I mean, like, it's not about it being fair or not fair. It's just the reality that however whatever kind of situation you were born into affects you for the rest of your life. And so anyway, at the same time, I wrote my book Deep Past Resolution about this, but I do believe that we chose to be here at this time in this place, and that wherever you are in your life, on the micro scale, and wherever you are fitting into the cog of this giant machine of America, or the entire machine of the planet, like wherever you are in there, like that is where you chose to be before you were born. That is my belief, and I wrote a book about it, but that our choices have played into it. And so then comes the question of, why did you choose into this? And so I'll invite you to sit with that and say, like, if I'm feeling stressed about this situation, if I'm worried about, the economy and like the trajectory of the nation and the planet, like, why would I have chosen to be born at this time? Why did I choose to be the one coming now at the denouement rather than, during like the greatest times? I would say the greatest times being I don't know, times when people were like kind of less worried about this kind of stuff. Maybe I made that up, because I think people have always kind of been concerned about this, but I think that there have been times where people were generally in a better mood on like a national level, and sometimes in a less good mood on a national level. But but if you're asking like, why now, I'm going to ask you, why now? Why did you choose to be born now? And that's something that you can just like close your eyes and tune into yourself and ask yourself and see what kind of answer you get. Because I think that we all did sign up for this. So, hey guys, we all signed up for this. Don't you remember? I think that things are going to be okay for us. I'm saying that specifically to people like hanging out with me right now, right here on my YouTube channel or whatever. If you've sat through over an hour of me yakking at 3 a.m, wow, you're in it to win it, just like me. But I'm not really concerned about us, because we are the ones that are working hard to figure out what's going on and taking action steps to heal ourselves, to heal our families, to put ourselves in the right place. We're working hard to listen to our creator, to get that inspiration, to make the right choices. We are all qualified to ask God what to do next and to get an answer on that. And I really believe that God wants us to have a good life, and God wants us to experience feelings of safety and security every day, that God wants us to feel happy every day. I just really believe that. And if we don't experience those things, I really believe it's because of us, because we are blocking our own ability to be happy and feel safe and feel secure and heal ourselves. So we get to turn to God and say, okay, well, how am I going to heal this? What do I need to do to get myself on the right track? Okay, well, I feel basically done now. Okay, thank you for listening. And I spent all of Saturday recording a bunch of videos for the month of September, and I've already scheduled them out here on YouTube. So hit the notification bell if you care. Every morning at 7 o'clock, a new video is going to come out about money, and we're going to be working on healing up our finances, because just like I just said, I really believe that God wants us to be financially secure. He wants us to experience financial stability. If we are not experiencing that, it's usually because there's something inside of us that we need to fix. So this is going to be a 30-day challenge for the whole month of September. Each video is like, they're mostly 5 minutes. Some of them, I think the longest one's like 11 minutes. So that's the range, but mostly on the shorter end. And we're just going to spend a minute every day tuning in and working on money-related stuff so that we can heal our hearts and prepare ourselves to experience more miracles when it comes to money, which has felt really important to me lately, is at least my own people. I want my own people to be as financially secure and stable as possible, given the immense insecurity that we're facing as a nation and as the global economy. So anyways, keep your eyes peeled for that. Thanks for hanging out with me. I just love you guys so much. I hope that this was helpful. Sorry about all my weirdo tangents. I hope we can still be friends. Yeah. and we'll talk again later. I always see people post about Ezra's Eagle. I made a presentation about it and then I haven't recorded it yet. But if you want to hear my Ezra's Eagle presentation, let me know because I keep thinking about it and then not doing it because it's a little controversial. Okay, we'll talk to you later, guys. Bye.